Chapter 9. The Lion of Strength. I sat atop my throne, chin resting on my hand, when the door opened, and Lilith strode through closely followed by all my friends. She threw up her hands and said with disgust, "If you wish to keep these vermin around, at least make sure they are kept out of my way." My eyes flashed red and I said, "Choose your next few words wisely, Mother. You may have had the power to boss people around down there, but here you play by my rules. Now state your business." I waved my hand and indicated for everyone to sit, but I indicated for Angel to sit by my side. Lilith tried to sit at the head of the table when Anubis growled at her, and Nyxera began to warm her throat, ready to blast Lilith on my command. Lilith eyed Nyxera up and down and said, "Wasn't this the dragon that I left to you as a child? I would have thought she would be larger by now. Anyway, why won't they let me sit down?" I eyed her up wearily and scoffed, "Because you're not the head of this castle. And they won't let you sit there because that is my throne. You may sit anywhere else. But more importantly, what are you doing here? Do you have knowledge where the next artifact lies?" Lilith smiled and replied quickly, "I have news on where to find the next one. But you will have to face Hercules and his trials. I have full faith in your abilities, but just be careful. My father has used his artifact on the remaining gods. They will listen to none, but one, Ammon himself." I took a few steps forward, waiting for the portal to open. I turned around and said, "What are we waiting for? I need to go now." Miasma shook his head slowly. "You need rest, boy. Your transformation took a great deal of power at the expense of your health. You don't know how much damage it may have caused to your internal system." I took a few steps forward when it felt like a bomb had gone off in my head. The light went out of my eyes and I fell to the floor, face first. Blood trickled out of my ears, my nose, and the corner of my mouth. Blackbeard instantly picked me up and bolted for the infirmary. Miasma began healing my body at once when Lilith quickly ran into the room trailing behind Angel. "What happened to my son? What's going on?" Seraphina stepped forward and said, "Rather than possessing something, Enadin instead transformed. Since he hasn't been taught how to control that, it may have fractured his mind. He was in agony the whole time. Surprisingly, the only thing that got him through that was focusing on Ammon's voice. But for now we will have to wait until the king is fully recovered." Dina glanced at Lilith, then clicked her fingers and sent a bolt of darkness in my stomach and snapped her fingers again. My body went rigid and I began thrashing violently. My eyes dimmed for a second before flashing again. I stood up and flexed my arms. I glanced around at the shocked gods. I asked what the hell just happened. Miasma peered over his glasses and inspected me with his eyes. By my guess I came to two conclusions. One is that someone used their powers to heal him discreetly, so as not to alert anyone of their great kindness. Miasma paused for a second and surveyed the gods, but his gaze lingered on Dina for a fraction longer than the others before continuing. "Or we were hit with a miracle and the heavens have blessed the boy with great health." I glanced at Dina and nodded slightly before snapping my fingers and the portal burst into life behind us. I stepped through the portal and found myself in a frozen arena in the depths of an unknown cave. The portal fizzled out behind me. The sound of tearing steel resounded through the cave. I tensed instinctively and waited for an attack. The attack didn't come, so I stood up and then out of nowhere I was grabbed and slammed into the wall with a single lion engraved gauntlet. Hungry eyes of my assailant sent shivers down my spine. A guttural bellow escaped from the beast before me. The beast relaxed his arm, then threw me into the opposite wall with a crunch. I watched the creature closely and saw the glinting muscle under his gown of dead animals. The beast drew his other hand and I noted it had morphed into a hammer of great size. The hammer rushed forward and punched a hole into the wall just above my head. I began to laugh uncontrollably and rose to my feet. The beast turned his gaze back to me and raised his hammer and pointed at me. The creature let off another guttural noise and jerked his head to the center of the cave. Still laughing menacingly, I led the way to the center. I waited for the best to take his place, then I sat on the floor staring eerily at the beast before me. The beast began shifting on each foot nervously, then sprang forward, hammer swinging. I quickly swung my legs around and appeared behind the beast. I reached my hand out and flicked his ear. The beast turned around in fury, teeth bared in frustration. Its strange eyes focused on me, and a single word fell from his cracked lips: place. I rushed forward and let loose a flurry of punches that shook the beast to the core. Between punches I roared, "Hercules, I know you're in there. Fight the darkness and you will be more powerful than you have ever felt before. I suffer the same as you. My mind, too, has been corrupted. But I've been fighting it from within. If you prefer, I can cleanse you of the corruption." Hercules stood for a second before shaking himself awake and rushing me. I let my power explode tenfold. Hercules stopped in his tracks and fixed his eyes upon me. Now even he felt my power burning him from where he stood. When I spoke, it was in the voice of 1,000 beings. Singular beautiful, together screams and cries of the damned. God of strength, you will fight us in your full glory. If you do not, I sentence you to death. Not a half death where you come back a century or so later. I mean permanently. Help me help you, boy. Hercules lowered himself to his knees and began rocking and crying loudly. I began to transform into the guise of that which he feared most. Ammon. I burst forth in a flash of speed, aiming to take a chunk out of the god of strength. But now, Hercules fought with new strength. His attacks purposeful and direct. I clicked my fingers and placed a feather from my wings into my power and curled my claws into a fist and struck Hercules as hard as I could. I sent him flying across the cavern and into the wall. I allowed my mortal guise to come forth and I stood before the god as myself. The god towered above me in height and power in this form. This is who I really am, Hercules. I was a nobody on the street, until I met Blackbeard. I used to sit by the ocean wishing if could fly above or below the waves. I could think that as a nobody, but now I have duties. Much like you. I serve this land and the next as guardian. I do what I can to protect my family. And you are part of that family, Hercules. We can only fight back at the King of the Dead with your help. Hercules concentrated and slowly his beast form melted away and he stood in his full grandeur. His determined eyes fixed upon mine and he nodded slightly and released the gauntlet from his one hand and let it hit the floor with such impact there is a hole big enough for a small child to hide. Hercules pointed his hand at the gauntlet and showed his own hand. I nodded and tried to pick up the gauntlet in my human form, but it was too heavy. I was about to release my power again when Hercules picked it up and gently placed the gauntlet over my hand, and he watched as it molded itself to fit my hand. The portal burst into life, but something was wrong. There was a strange noise coming from within. My demon form instantly exploded, throwing shards of dark and light through the cave. I burst forward in a streak of light and tore through the portal at high speed. The other side of the portal was a mess. Legions of the doomed shuffled and darted around the palace. There was not one familiar face in sight. Someone stood next to me, and I knew it was Hercules. I could feel my anger burning furiously inside, and I bellowed in rage. I stormed forward, attacking any demon dumb enough to enter my personal space. The unholy fire burned deep inside my chest, threatening to take control. I stared at the throne and saw my mother sprawled out, lounging in the throne, like it belonged to her. I stalked forward, intent on tearing her to pieces. When Hercules placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You are king, child. If you want her gone, then let us do it for you. We are your sword and shield and your judgment." I held my hand up to silence the lion of strength. I stared my mother deep into the eye and began, "You think you should become queen, do you, mother? Then perhaps I should send you to your beloved father. I may just summon Ammon here just so he can take you back." Lilith rose to her feet and snapped her fingers. The doors crashed open and the gods were escorted in, all bound tightly in chains. At the head of the prisoners was Layla, and bringing up the rear was Blackbeard. I turned blazing eyes onto my mother and stormed forward. She held up her hand and my step faltered. She smiled cruelly and snapped, "If you make any movement towards me, then your precious gods shall die." starting with her. Lilith pointed a quivering finger at Layla. I bowed my head and fell to my knee. Lilith laughed maliciously. "Oh, Ammon. The boy is ready to take now. He is yours." There was no answer. No familiar booming laughter. No snide remarks. Instead, all that happened was the floor opened at my mother's feet, tossing her back down into the depths of hell. My mother's minions crumbled into dust as her power faded rapidly as she fell. I rose to my feet and glanced around before incinerating the chains that bound the gods. I stepped back and pitched over as my head felt the familiar buzz as everything went numb. My blood began to bubble violently, but I managed to hide the pain from the others, until I collapsed to my knee, then fell onto my side. The cackle and the voice came next. "Greetings, mortal. I trust that you knew it was me that dealt with that small problem. No one impedes your work but me. Talking of distractions." There was a boom at the door, and we stood silent, staring at each other. I blurred forward and barreled out the door and stood face to face with a legion of fallen angels. Each looked as crazy and deranged as the last. The gods joined my side, staring at the sea of angels. I drew my weapon when I saw something or someone forcing their way to the front, shoving and pushing other lowly fallen angels out of the way. I saw more clearly the closer the figure got. I leaped forward and slashed instantly. Rigel moved slightly and dodged the attack. He held his arms behind his back, not a care in the world. Then he spoke. "Son. Enough. I have not come here to challenge you. I came here because I could feel the energy from your mother. Where is she? She must be dealt with." I glared at my father in silence, and Dina stood by my side, arm over my shoulder. "Why now? Why do you wish to deal with her now? Why, after we killed you and sent you back wherever you came from, do you wish to help?" Rigel gazed soullessly at us and didn't utter a word. We stood staring at each other in cold silence for what seemed like an age before Rigel finally answered, "You already know the answer to that, son. As Goliath may have mentioned, Ammon corrupted our minds. And after you killed that demon who was with us, his power fled from our minds. And now I wish to help you fight the wretched demon and his vile spawn." I ignored my father's plea, and rose to my full height as a demon and addressed the fallen angels before us. "Those of you who wish to fight for us, destroy those that oppose us on this battlefield, and leave their carcass as a warning to any others that dare to oppose us." The battlefield became chaos, and I drank the chaos in greedily. I began laughing maniacally, wielding my sword in one hand and the battle axe of Osriel in the other. I turned my savage gaze upon my father and charged the high angel. He snapped his fingers, and a blazing spear made of dazzling sunlight and a jagged cross appeared in his hands. We became two demons fighting quicker and quicker, dancing to the fatal blows of our attacks. Dina looked on helplessly as we fought harder and stronger by every passing second. Then she had an idea. She conjured up a billowing cloud of darkness and encased up both in it. When the cloud had dissipated, it showed both of us wrapped tightly in chains, suspended above the battlefield. I raised my eyebrow at her and grinned evilly. Dina glanced nervously up at me and began to shift uncomfortably. The chains shattered around me, and I hit the floor, landing on my feet. I turned my gaze onto my father and drew my blades once again. Dina began to morph and appeared behind me. Her demonic voice sent shivers down my back, and I turned to face her. The darkness surrounding her became sharp and jagged, writhing violently this way and that. I roared for the battle to come to an end, and the few fallen angels who didn't listen died painfully in an instant. Dina's fury was even worse than mine at this point. She raised her head to the skies and shrieked loudly, nearly bursting our ears. The battlefield fell silent, and Dina morphed back into herself and stepped back, allowing me the space to speak. "Fallen angels gathered here today. This is a momentous day for all of us. Through helping me, you may all rise as angels again, and through me gaining your arms, I can collect the last remaining artifacts to finally take down the Demon King. There is a reason it is important we finish this task as soon as possible. There is an invasion coming, and as we are, there is no stopping it. Not by normal means, as this is not a normal army. As of now, you must train harder than you have trained before. Push yourself past your limits and you will survive with me and stand victorious. And one more thing, I am your king now. That angel is not worthy of the title he carries. But leave him to Gabriel's judgment. This is business between angels.